Hello and welcome to Military Power TV. Today, we examine a developing and controversial story, a discrete buildup of U.S. offensive forces in the Caribbean, forces that Washington says are intended to fight drug trafficking, but which many analysts believe could be positioned for a far more consequential contingency, an operation to depose Nicolás Maduro and restore Venezuela's democratically elected president, Edmundo González Urrutia. In the next 10 minutes, we'll unpack the political context, the military posture, the historical parallels, and the strategic, technical, and diplomatic risks involved. To understand why the Caribbean is suddenly so important, we must begin in Caracas. After the July 2024 presidential elections, opposition leader Edmundo González Urrutia claimed victory with 67% of the vote. The Maduro regime, which controls the National Electoral Council, rejected the results, declared itself the winner, and refused to produce transparent evidence. The outcome split international recognition. Authoritarian governments, such as Russia and China, continued to back Maduro, while many democratic states withheld recognition. In this climate, the legitimacy crisis in Venezuela has become an open geopolitical problem with serious strategic consequences. Venezuela is not just a political problem, it's a geostrategic one. The country holds some of the world's largest proven oil reserves. The oil is heavy and technically difficult to extract, and U.S. sanctions have complicated its global sale and processing. Nevertheless, control over Venezuelan oil would represent a major strategic prize. For U.S. policymakers concerned about energy security and strategic leverage, the idea of preventing hostile actors from exploiting Venezuela's resources has a clear appeal, and it complicates the calculus behind any military option. Over recent weeks, observers have reported a concentrated and in some cases secretive movement of U.S. forces into the Caribbean. Reports point to deployments and pre-positioning in Puerto Rico and the Southern Caribbean, stealth fighters like the F-35B, tilt-rotor V-22 Ospreys, MQ-9 Reaper drones, naval task groups, and a significant contingent of Marines. Open-source estimates circulating in some analyst circles place the number of embarked U.S. Marines at roughly 4,500 aboard a multi-ship group, along with accompanying destroyers and amphibious ships. Officially, U.S. statements emphasize counter-narcotics and regional security, but many observers point out that the scale and composition of these forces far exceed what would normally be required to chase go-fast smuggling boats. When analysts discuss a potential U.S. operation in the Western Hemisphere, the most immediate historical parallel is the 1989 invasion of Panama to remove Manuel Noriega. That operation used about 27,000 U.S. troops and achieved rapid regime change at relatively low U.S. cost, though it also produced significant civilian casualties and long-term political consequences. But Venezuela is a far different proposition. Far larger territory, more complex terrain, a standing military reported numbering in the hundreds of thousands, and a broad network of armed militias. That size difference alone makes a speedy, low-cost blitz unlikely. But warfare in 2025 is not 1989. Drones, precision-guided munitions, electronic warfare, and stealth aircraft can reduce the force needed to accomplish certain objectives, especially if the plan is surgical. Decapitate command and control nodes, suppress air defenses, and secure critical political centers. Some analysts have argued that a much smaller, highly enabled force, perhaps 8,000 to 12,000 Marines and Special Operations elements, supported by air and naval fires, might achieve objectives comparable to the Panama-era operation. That is a contested and risky proposition because it assumes rapid collapse of organized resistance and only limited foreign interference. Washington's public rationale centers on counter-narcotics, defeating transnational criminal organizations, interdicting trafficking routes, and protecting regional security. There is real precedent for large interdiction deployments in littoral waters and Caribbean choke points. But the forces observers now see, advanced fighters, long-endurance drones, amphibious assault formations, are also the very tools needed for forcible entry and regime change operations. Critics worry that counter-narcotics can become a convenient political cover for escalatory planning or for pre-positioning forces that can be retasked if political directives change. An intervention in Venezuela carries many risks. Militarily, urban warfare and guerrilla resistance would be costly and protracted. Venezuelan forces and militias could mount insurgent campaigns in cities and jungle interiors. Politically, any U.S. invasion in the region risks alienating key partners and provoking heated debate internationally. Russia and China would likely respond with diplomatic and economic pressure, sanctions, and intensified support for Caracas short of direct military intervention. Logistically, sustaining an occupation or long-term stabilization mission in a country the size of Venezuela would demand sustained resources, reconstruction funds, and a clear political plan for governance and security sector reform, all difficult to guarantee amid a polarized U.S. domestic environment. So what is the actual probability the U.S. will invade Venezuela? Many analysts currently put it in the low to moderate range. The force posture looks intentional, it applies real pressure to Maduro, signals resolve to allies, and gives Washington options. Yet, invasion remains politically costly and operationally risky. A show of force can coerce concessions without firing a shot, and many strategists believe that maximum pressure coupled with diplomatic isolation may be the intended outcome. Still, because the assets and capabilities required for a direct action are present in the theater, the possibility cannot be entirely discounted. If the U.S. were to move beyond pressure and into an actual offensive operation, the campaign would likely begin with long-range strikes to degrade air defenses and command nodes, an overflight and ISR campaign using MQ-9 Reapers and space and airborne sensors to map air defenses and troop dispositions, followed by precision strikes and targeted seizures of key infrastructure, ports, airports, power plants, and communication hubs. Special operations and marine expeditionary units would likely lead the initial ground effort to seize political centers and key nodes. The goal would be to minimize urban destruction and civilian casualties, but the reality of urban fighting often contradicts that aspiration. Finally, any military option would be inseparable from diplomacy. The United States would need regional partners, overflight and basing agreements, and at least tacit international support to legitimize intervention and manage the aftermath. Even if Russia and China avoid direct military involvement, they can complicate stabilization through political and economic means. The long-term success of any regime change depends not only on removing Maduro, but also on constructing a credible, inclusive political transition and securing international recognition and aid, a tall order. In short, what we're seeing in the Caribbean is more than routine counter-narcotics activity. It is a deliberate posture that expands Washington's options and increases pressure on the Maduro regime. Whether that posture is intended to coerce, reassure allies, or prepare for a contingency is still an open question, and a consequential one. An invasion remains a complex, dangerous, and politically fraught option, but the presence of advanced forces and capabilities in the region means it is technically possible and therefore must be taken seriously by policymakers, regional partners, and citizens alike. If you found this analysis useful, please hit like, subscribe to Military Power TV, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into global military developments. Drop a comment below. Do you think the US will invade Venezuela? What would be the consequences? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.